Please continue to rise as you are able for the reading of the Holy Gospel. The Gospel lesson this morning comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 3, verses 15 through 17, and verses 21 through 22. Luke tells us of Jesus' baptism. As the people were in expectation, all of them questioning in their hearts concerning John, whether perhaps he were the Christ, John answered them all, I baptize you with water, but the one who is mightier than I is coming, the thong of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. That one will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. With winnowing fork in hand, that one will clear the threshing floor and gather the wheat into the granary, but will burn the chaff with unquenchable fire. Now when all the people were baptized, and when Jesus also had been baptized and was praying, the heaven opened, and the Holy Spirit descended upon Jesus in bodily form as a dove. And a voice came from the heaven, You are my beloved child. With you I am well pleased. May God add understanding to the reading of this gospel. Please be seated. God, I ask that you send your Spirit upon me this day. Anoint my heart and anoint my lips. Let the words that I speak be your words and not my own. Remove me from myself, my fears, concerns, and anxieties, and replace all of that with the movement of your Holy Spirit within me. And I ask God for that same Spirit to be poured out this day upon the ears of those who would hear a message. That whatever message they hear today be exactly the words that they need from you today on their faith journey. Amen. This morning, we remember the baptism of Jesus as recorded in the Scriptures. Now, John the Baptist had already told his followers that the Messiah would be coming soon. He had explained to them that he offered a baptism of water only, and Jesus would come and baptize with the Holy Spirit and with fire. The baptism performed by John the Baptist should not be discarded or considered of a lesser importance. We are taught that through the baptism by water, we are allowing the pouring out of the Holy Spirit to happen for us. Some people are baptized as an infant, according to the traditions of the denomination that they are a part of. I, for one, being born into the Roman Catholic Church, I was baptized at the ripe old age of 5 days old. However, that baptism was valid and vitally important. I later in life, at the age of 18, wanted to make the decision of a public baptism for myself. I was then baptized by immersion in a baptismal pool at MCC Dallas. It was then, when I chose to receive that baptism, that I was willing also to accept the pouring out of the Holy Spirit. It was then that I felt I was ready to begin my studies for ministry. It was exactly the same for Jesus. Prior to that baptism of Jesus, he had spent his days working as a carpenter, studying and praying. After the baptism, when he came out of the water and the Holy Spirit descended upon him, after this experience, and he heard for himself that God spoke and said, You are my beloved child. With you I am well pleased. This is the moment that Jesus began his public ministry, and he went forth healing people, raising them from the dead, teaching other people. I've never figured out how to raise people from the dead yet. So I guess I need to go back and try this again. It was this moment that Jesus had another one of the big revelation moments in his life. At this moment, he felt a strong and true connection with God, the parent, and knew that he was called for a mission far beyond what he had ever expected. The good news for us is that baptism is not just a once-in-a-lifetime event. Baptism is at any time we recall our relationship and our own mission in connection with God and Jesus. Baptism is at any time that we feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. It may be at times of despair when all things seem lost, and for some odd reason you feel a sense of calm and of peace about you and your circumstances. This is the movement of the Holy Spirit. It may be during good times of your life, a good grade in your class, a good job review or a promotion, a moment when you feel happy and excited for something that has just happened. That is the movement of the Holy Spirit. It can be a time in your life while celebrating some big event, like your graduation or a wedding. It is that moment that you feel so excited and blessed for what you have. That is the movement of the Holy Spirit. Baptism and the pouring out of the Holy Spirit, listen to this carefully, is not just reserved for those who have gone through the physical acts of baptism by water. It is a gift freely given by God, from God, to anyone that is wanting to accept that they are someone of a greater calling and a bigger mission in life. I know people personally. I've met them. I've had meals with them. I know people that view themselves as agnostic or even atheists who have truly had the Holy Spirit working in and through them. It's crushing, isn't it? It's not just for the Christian. It's for anybody. Anybody. It is again the moments in your life when you have accomplished something and feel a sense of contentment and peace within your life. This truly is the movement of the Holy Spirit. I can think of two very diverse people. One who's with us today, and one who rarely comes into our church. We've got David, and there's a woman named Chris, who for years were the youth directors and counselors at the Northwest Arkansas Center for Equality. And you can't tell me that their compassion and their love and the education that they offered those young gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender people was not the movement of the Holy Spirit. And there's no two people more different than David and Chris. The same Spirit works magnificently through both. It may be that odd person that comes around and knocks on your door and bugs you. That's the movement of the Holy Spirit. From the book of Isaiah, we will also find in chapter 43, verse 5, I have called you by name and you are mine. How precious are you? God has actually called you by name. God didn't say, hey, you. God didn't say, hey, you whore. Hey, you beggar. Hey, you queer. God called you by your name personally and claimed you as God's own. When life sometimes leaves you feeling that you are all alone, or you are afraid of what lies ahead, keep that phrase in the forefront of your heart and your mind. Let that phrase be your constant prayer in all that you will face in this world. You are not alone. You have been called by name and you belong to God. Keep also in your prayer the fact that God said to Jesus, and God says to each of us today, you are my child. With you I am very pleased. What a wonderful world we'd be living in if we all viewed everyone we meet along our journey with the understanding that they also were called by name and were God's own. If we could view everyone we meet and know that God has also said to them, you are my child. With you I'm very pleased. If we could accept that about each other and every person we meet, then there would be no judgment of one another, or injustice, or bullying, or hatred. We would just simply be too occupied with the value of the inner person of each person that we would see, and that we would not see the things that separate us from one another. I encourage you today and every day to remind yourself of your own baptism. Remember to accept the movement of the Holy Spirit, and you will have the power to overcome any situation that is presented in your life. We used to meet at UCM, and in their bathrooms and in their kitchen, Susan always had a picture of hands being washed at the sink to remind people to wash their hands after going to the restroom. But she always had the same caption above it. Remember your baptism. How simple that would be. If every time you washed your hands, you remember your holy baptism. The water wasn't magical. John was dipping in muddy water. The water wasn't pure. But let that every time you wash your hands, remember your baptism. Remember every time you overcome an obstacle or get rid of the negativity. Remember all those times your baptism and what was said in that moment. You are my child, and I am very pleased with you. I have called you by name, and you are my very own.